Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you this afternoon. Thank you again for coming. I really have found this to be a lot of interesting conversation. And I want to, as quickly as possible, get to the conversation part of it. So we'll do some brief introductions, and then I'll ask maybe a couple questions, and then hopefully we'll get you all involved. Not just so much of asking questions of the panelists, but maybe in answering some questions yourselves or giving a few ideas. Let me introduce myself. I am Managing Director of Corporate Partnerships at Environmental Defense Fund. And I'm sure you are most of you are aware of EDF. EDF's a national environmental group that's been around for about 45 years. And we started off in the litigious 1970s in using environmental laws, and our informal motto back then was "Sue the bastards." And now our motto is finding the ways that work. So that kind of says it all about how we've transformed. And I manage our work with Walmart. I've been at EDF for over 13 years. So I've always been doing corporate partnerships work. And it was very different back then to now, as evidenced by the fact that there's a standing room only room here of really interesting people from all across the supply chain. I manage our work with Walmart from San Francisco. I'm proud to say that it's the home of the World Series champion Giants. Nobody cares, like west of San Diego. Anyway, I just want to make that point, because if Boston won or New York had won, I'll still be hearing about it. So thank you. I feel better. And the one other thing I wanted to let you all know about is something very important to me and to our EDF team, and that is that we have an open position in our office here in Bentonville, working with Michelle and other team members, another person based in North Carolina, and we've got a team of about 5 people, have an open position. So if you all want to, make the switch to nonprofit, no, I'm not trying to get you to abandon your jobs. Keep doing your hard work. But I would love it if anybody would be in touch with Andy. Where are you, Andy? Andy Wonder from our team. He's got the job descriptions. And if anybody can pass the word out, I'd very much appreciate it. So with that said, let me start with, I guess, you, Chip, because you do your introduction and talk about some of your work.
I guess I'm probably the only person in here who did care how the World Series turned out, being from Dallas, but that's okay.
Sorry about that.
My name is Chip Jones, and I'm with Dean Foods Company. We're one of the largest dairy processors in the country, about 100 manufacturing plants spread across the country. I head up our corporate responsibility activities, which is ethics, compliance, and sustainability. And one of the things that Michelle asked me to talk about was kind of turning transparency into action. And Leah, we were at a meeting a month or so ago, and she, I think, attributed a quote to Andy Rubin that went something like, "We're all going to be naked soon, so you might as well get buff." If that disturbs you at all, please take your complaints to Leah. But I mean, that really does, and I just want to kind of drive home that point. We set our water, solid waste, and energy reduction targets about 4 years ago. And you can see that what I have up here are just some snapshots of 3 plants, a water efficiency ratio, and then a kilowatt per hour usage ratio on an intensity basis. And you can see that the plant that is at 0.99 gallons of water per gallon of product produced is well ahead of its target for the year. So they're making incredible progress, but the problem is they were very inefficient to begin with. So once you kind of force rank these plants together, all of a sudden you start to see dramatic improvement. And you can see a similar story that on the electrical side. So again, once you start to track that data and you manage expectations, you can see pretty quick improvement. And what that has done for Dean Foods, again, at Walmart's nudging, we've been participating with the Carbon Disclosure Project. And because of that focus that we're placing as an organization, you can see the 2010 results. We were the only food and beverage company to be placed both on the leadership index and the performance index. So that transparency has really helped those individual plants, but then Dean as an enterprise as well.
Well, let's go ahead and finish up the introductions then. Sean, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Sean Stevens, or sorry, Sean. Everybody calls me Sean Stevens because it's easier, but I do have two first names, Sean and Steven. I represent Waste Management here, and I'm glad to be here. My background, I was a former Walmart alum, so I have a few colleagues in here that are looking at me right now with the scrutiny. And I promise I won't say anything, bad, so I won't get sued. So, but again, glad to be on this panel to be able to kind of exemplify what we're talking about with waste and what we're doing around sustainability. So.
I was gonna joke that I could be the fire-breathing environmentalist after that hummus at lunch. So I'm glad everyone's at a safe distance. That was crazy. Yeah, let's just do some introductions, and then it probably would be good to talk about the basics of your sustainability programs. What are your top priorities?
My name is Catherine Greener, and for those of you who came up to me earlier, it really is my name. I didn't change it, and it's really. Oh, he's like, yeah. And it's interesting because where I am today and sitting here talking about this topic, I'm talking about, they call it the hot spots, the blind spots, and the bright spots, is really a culmination of the labyrinth that's been my career. I started in the early 80s as a maintenance supervisor at General Motors as an industrial engineer, a product of, I'm sure, a diversity program, because when I was recruited, it was like, you're a woman, you're an engineer? Come to Detroit. And where they taught just-in-time manufacturing. And I was one of the first students of just-in-time at General Motors. They sent us to GE to learn it. And as an industrial engineer, learning about systems and systems waste, it just seemed like, well, seems natural. I won't go through, but I spent 20 years, almost 20 years in Detroit, focusing on just-in-time. They call it lean now. I think that sounds probably cooler. I spent a lot of time in quality. I'm Six Sigma black belt, the ISO 9000. I've checked, those types of things. Focusing continuous improvement, supplier development. When you run a quality department, employee engagement, we called them quality circles back then. Now it's much cooler. The branding has gotten much better. And it was all about efficiency and effectiveness. And I read a book in the late 90s. It was a galley then called Natural Capitalism by Hunter Lovins, Amory Lovins, and Paul Hawken. I put the book down and had a reaction that most people don't have. I said, well, I think I can go do this. Had a chance to meet Amory Lovins, and he said, excuse me, he said, really, you can do this? Would you like to live in Aspen? Detroit, Aspen. Okay, I think I'll go. And it really was like a graduate experience in learning about this quality. So with a quality background in this thing called sustainability, I'm not quite sure I understood it. And I can talk about the hot spots, blind spot. Do you want? Okay, great. And I started asking questions. We always used to talk about zero defects, knowing that it was an aspirational goal that you could put your system around it. So we hear about zero waste, knowing that thermodynamically that's not possible. But what about if it's aspirational? How do we break down the systems? And I started to think in the quality world, I said, there's just a couple of simple tools that we can use. Thinking about in priority order. How do we solve our problems in priority order? This is, Vonda was trying not to lose the voice. I think it's the podium, So when you think about in priority order and you say, what is my largest problem that I'm solving? And that becomes your hotspot. As you're starting, before you do your LCA, think about what is my biggest problem? Don't we ask that in quality? They sometimes call it your tall bar if you're doing Pareto analyses. The tools, we have it when you start to think and reframe it. We had a quality tool, especially in automotive. We called it failure mode and effects analysis. And if you're not familiar with it, it's pretty geeky, but it's really cool. And I can explain it later. You get to multiply things and prioritize. Really cool. But it says, where do I understand the lurking risks that I have in my system? What's my probability of occurrence? And what will be the overall impact should that oops actually happen? And how do I rank then what my risks are? What's going to hit me next? And am I prepared as an organization to do that? The quality folks, we deal all the time with these. We hand these cool forms. But those are really what we call your blind spots. And that can easily translate into your sustainability program. And then finally, you have an operationalization. What are your bright spots? What do you do really well that you just want to boast about? That you just really want to be good? Quality, we hear like listening to the voice of the customer. In automotive, quality, I know it when I see it. It's a car door that just slams really well. I really don't need to know about how tense that spring is in that door. It just sounds good, feels good, perceived that way. It's my bright spot. What can I talk about that will really resonate with my customer and the consumer? One interesting thing we heard today was the unnatural, the natural consumer. What are the needs of the natural consumer? Well, if you picture a retail door that had the two entrances, it said for natural consumers and unnatural consumers. And you think about that. Who really wants to go in that unnatural door? And like, no, I want to be a natural consumer. So thinking about what will resonate, what's your bright spot? And just thinking of like, what are the tools that you have to resonate for operationalization of sustainability? I think, was that 3 minutes? Okay.
That's good. Definitely good. Chip, do you want to start telling us how you started down this path, and what's your hot spot?
Well, the cow is definitely the hot spot in the dairy supply chain. We started down this path. There were a couple things that were going on kind of simultaneously. We're a roll-up of the dairy business over the first about 15 years in our maturity now. So the first 10 years was very much an M&A phase. And the last 5 years has been, what do you do with all these things that you bought? So as we've matured as an organization, we started to get pressures from other stakeholders saying, Dean Foods, when are you going to do a CSR report? When are you going to start telling us more about your business? And at the same time, the Walmart influence is kind of beginning to happen at the same time. So those things kind of came together, and it was pretty much a no-brainer decision that we need to do better.
And your bright spot, were there things that you just knew that you were probably doing better than anyone else? And
certainly our scale gives us a huge opportunity to do things better, and we're in the phase right now of trying to use that scale to our advantage.
So this session is about building sustainability into your business, and you've got that scale, and that means that you can do a lot. Does it hinder innovation though? How do you take the brightest, most far out ideas that actually may be good for business in the near future and try and do some of those?
If I could solve that one, I probably wouldn't be sitting up here. It really, what we've seen is it's been very dependent on the culture and the people. And where we've seen the most exciting innovation, it's from people that needed no nudging whatsoever. They just kind of get it. Just as an example, our VP of Transportation, we don't exercise a lot of influence on just over-the-road trucking, but because we're one of the largest refrigerated distribution networks, we can exercise some leverage on how you refrigerate that truck. And so he went to our suppliers and said, look, we've got 2 diesel engines on these trucks. We don't need 2 diesel engines. Let's figure out a way to take it to 1. Mm-hmm. And so we've been piloting a Thermo King truck in Texas that has replaced one of those diesel engines that's running off the main engine. So no one nudged him to go do this. He just did it on its own. So when you can find those champions in your organization and give them cover and support when they're kind of doing things that might be not on their job description, those are the people from a sustainability standpoint that you need to tap into.
Mm-hmm. That makes total sense. Sean, tell me some more about your business and kind of driving sustainability. And it's all about waste, and with when Walmart achieves its zero waste goal next year, you're not going to be needed anymore, right? I mean, how do you think about it as a company, and how do you think about creating value?
We, as Waste Management, we've seen, and me newly just getting into this business, the last 10 years, landfill tonnage is going down. So diversion is key. Our CEO, our corporate leadership has taken the stance that we're going to be driving more towards diversion, recovery, and recycling. basically extracting more value out of the materials we currently have in our system. We are the largest recycler in North America. We export a third of what we collect. So we have the opportunity to work with key suppliers to Walmart, work with other retailers as we're doing, in various capacities for our business, in closed loop opportunities with materials, all the way down to regulation and legislation, from extended producer responsibility, which spurs innovation, all the way to what you call individual producer responsibility and collection and take-back programs from e-waste, recycling, and so forth. So our business model is really changing more towards the sustainability, but the main driver of that is being focused on our customer. And as Waste Management, everyone in this room is a customer of Waste Management. So you look at wherever you dispose of any type of material or recycle, it's more likely 80% of it is going to hit one of our systems and come into our custody. So, and we appreciate that when you do that. So that's how we're driving our growth of the future and innovation for Waste Management.
Do you want to talk a little bit about waste to energy and that it's a thorny topic in a lot of ways because it holds some it's not something I know deeply, but I just I understand that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of benefits to it, but also some really interesting challenges in terms of it driving the right outcomes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
And taking incineration out of the matrix, okay, Michelle? All right. There's been long topics on that. Yeah, the main focus on waste energy, and probably the one that is the most complicated to figure out because there is no infrastructure, is around organics. And I think, Vonda, you could probably back me up on that as well. There are lots of technologies out there, new technologies, and how we're investing. As a Waste Management, we're investing in these technologies, these companies that are startups or actually own a good market share of waste energy. We're doing landfill gas extraction right now, which is very popular. I mean, just 35 minutes up the road in Springdale, Tawnytown, we actually have a landfill gas operation going on right now, which will generate about 3 to 4 kilowatts of power to Northwest Arkansas. We are making significant investments in the organics piece, which is anaerobic digestion, both dry and wet, which converts to methane gas and is burned off, and the resulting biomass is then used for compost. So it fits in with the hierarchy model what the EPA is looking at, and we are partnering with several federal institutions and other partners from the industry to develop new technologies around the organics infrastructure, and also there's some other technologies I can talk about, but they're kind of proprietary. I don't get into them, so I'm not the knowledge expert either on that one particular. But that's kind of the infrastructure right now. It's finding the right partner and building that infrastructure to do it right, to collect all the waste forms that can be converted to waste energy. And I think, and that's one of the reasons that fascinated most about coming into Waste Management's organization, is it reminds me of Back to the Future, and a lot of us in this room probably seen that movie about the DeLorean where you're sticking food and it can power. It's almost a sidestep of cold fusion. So as a biochemical engineer and a former scientist, that's when I get excited because I want the first car that can run on garbage.
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. I mean, if you think about what is garbage and what happens, and I think there's product design group. Some of the things is, we help our clients to think through this is, if you think through the whole chain, right now, we're thinking differently, but the system is a take, make, use, waste, and there are variations of that. And those are some really good BTUs that we're just entombing and just sitting there. And there's a lot of great BTUs. And so you're sitting there and you have a great opportunity in waste management because of that opportunity. But as you start to think through the system, is where are the BTUs and where are they being wasted in your system? And thinking about that, from the product design. And somebody earlier brought up the manufacturing and all those other, you look at your system, think about it as a BTU system, and keep putting those different lenses, and you get them. At the end, you get BTUs to manage too. You start to think differently. Will you design differently? Will you manufacture differently? In this operationalization, as we start getting back to some of our units of energy and measurement, it'd be kind of fun to see the innovation that comes out of it.
For the two of you guys in companies, how much of what you're doing is a pull from the customer versus a push on your part for, I've got these ideas that I want to do, or this new technology, this new innovation. Where do you see that? And I know it's just your own experience, but maybe if you could speak about your own experience and others that you've seen, how much of it's push versus pull?
I think a lot of it is, at least where we are currently, is internally driven. So we've got a lot of initiatives just to become more efficient, and we consider that to be critical to our success. So I think certainly the discussions with Walmart hasn't hurt, and use that to place emphasis where you may have some skeptics. But by and large, one of the key strategies of our organization is to take cost out of our system. And so that is getting appropriate emphasis throughout the organization.
I think for any business, voice of the customer, and being a former, I'm also in the same ranks as she, being a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt in my former life. Voice of the customer is always the first, priority in product development or establishing any kind of process or program. What we've seen, and again, looking over the last 10 years of the business, is the voice of the customer says, look, we're not going to be putting things in a landfill anymore. We want to have diversion. We want the industry. We want the government to take methods to make it easy for us to do it. We have to make it easy to do it. We have to make it easy for our people who are making our products that we use every day in the facilities. We have to make those processes easy for them to understand. Those products and those processes, those components, easily recyclable, diverted before it even gets to us, the right streams.
Right.
And that's building the infrastructure. And how we do that is the future. But again, it's the voice of the customer. They're telling us sustainability is the future.
That's good. Catherine, you see so many different companies in your life now, and you have in your past experience too. So what are the best ideas that you've seen for driving business value? What are the best ideas? And kind of putting you on the spot here, but
The best.
Yeah, what are some best examples maybe of building sustainability into your business?
So best examples of building it in. Are you talking about from a product, from a process, people?
Well, I guess I really left it open, so you
Okay.
can wing it any way you want. To give you another moment to think. The other kind of question that I really wanted to hear from the panel, and then to open up to all y'all, is examples of the best ways to create business value and that fall into the different buckets of cost savings, risk reduction, and then maybe marketing and PR benefits. And that's just one way to slice it, right? There's other ways you could look at it. But I'd love to hear some great ideas, because I think that this kind of forum, we're all at different places, and companies are all at different places in their sustainability journey, but maybe you can hear something that someone else is doing or thinking about that you just haven't. So that's kind of the conversation I'd like to get going.
So one of the ways I'll start and help make a discussion is to look at it, and I think that's a great question from a tee up. One way at Clear Green Advisors we look at it to say, do I have a sustainable thing, is to look at it from a system perspective. Is it embedded in my strategy? Do I have the vision? We talked about how much the zero waste vision at Walmart and other companies, we had it, has led to other innovations. Is it in my product? Is it in my processes? Is it in my infrastructure, my hard assets? And are my people fully engaged, and do they get it? From a strategy perspective, what some of the best things we see, that it's just been embedded into the performance goals, not only of the executives, but all the way down to the line. One of our clients is Nissan, and they use Hoshin Kanri, which is a way of strategic planning, where you set goals and you cascade it all the way through the organization. So they have the same goals, including the sustainability goal for executive. And then it's translated all the way down to an operator who's putting a fastener on a vehicle. And so you have that complete alignment from a strategy perspective. So it's more than just a vision, it's in everybody's marching orders. From a product perspective, outside of, I talk about bananas a lot, but outside of that, there's a small company, and
Talk about bananas. No, not everybody knows your banana example.
sorry, we're talking about it. It's like, I was kidding around with the product designer, and he said, there's a ratio when you design from a packaging perspective. You only need the useful life of what you're selling, but yet some of our packaging can last for centuries and centuries after the useful life of the product. So what if we designed a ratio that was use over useful life? And how would you evaluate? Just quick, it's not terribly scientific, no 4 decimal places, but just when you're making quick decisions. So why don't you just call it the Greener ratio? It is your name. And I said, well, the only thing I know of would be a banana, because when that useful life of that banana is not very good. You leave it in the car, and you're like, that was a good idea. I was going to eat that banana, but it failed. It's over. When that, and when the banana's almost not so good and it becomes a smoothie. All right, so it's one of my banana examples. But the product they talked about is one of my favorite products, and it's sold in some high-end beauty stores. It's a company that's making, it's a Boulder, and I apologize for the Republic of Boulder examples I'll give, but it's Pangea soap, the soap particularly, where the soap, he's got some funky processes, but when you're done with the soap, the box, you can plant it in your garden and you get basil. I'm not quite sure how it exactly happens, but you get basil from the box. And he goes out of the way to use cold press oils and things like that to really have it. And I said, why soap? Because it's what people really just need. All that other stuff, you just need soap. So think about it from the best examples. I can go and I'll just do, I'll do an infrastructure example, a company called Prologis, and I'll let other people talk about other ones. There's a company, we're the largest owner, operator of distribution centers. People know Prologis. They asked themselves one time, the question like, who wants or you don't want? Well, they have hot, flat roofs, right? You usually don't want hot, flat roofs. So they're investigating the funky arrangements with the local utility providers to lease their roof to put in PV because they have hot, flat roofs in sunny areas and start to become an energy generator, from an infrastructure. So thinking about that, who wants what you don't want? So I'll open it up and let other people talk about some different examples. But just think around that, what's in your strategy, your product, your process, your infrastructure, and then how do you really engage your people around this?
From waste management's perspective, one thing that drove us a perfect example is the reason why I'm sitting here and Shane's sitting over at the tables. They took a step forward to develop what all CPG companies who supply to Walmart, they have a customer focus team based here in Bentonville, and to concentrate just basically and work with suppliers and Walmart. And this was a step, waste management, it's a total different direction than what they're used to doing. But we decided not to call it a customer focus team, but a sustainable solutions team. And so now there's an office of 7, soon to expand to 15, and that's all we do. And we are completely focused on our customer, and it's how the top leadership is focusing on sustainability. Is we need to focus on our customers. And that includes, residents, whether it's residential, commercial, or business. But also, this was a strategic direction of where and who can help shape the infrastructure of America and globally is with Walmart. So this was a really one of the key, I see, milestones in moving towards a sustainability directive within waste management. Because we've kind of always been sustainable. A sustainable company. We just don't talk about it. PR. And so now you'll see a lot of our trucks running around with different signage and different things, which is good. But it's floored me on what actually they do and what they have done, and they just don't market it and don't talk about it.
So talk about it more, right?
That's
That's
right.
one of the messages.
That's absolutely right. A lot of people don't know that a lot of our landfills that are get closed off. Those are actually turned into nature preserves for wildlife, and it's a program that we've established with a lot of state governments, and so it's really impressive. And I thought that was really neat. We have several of them, so they're actually reserves and wildlife habitats. And we're also using it for energy as well. So.
So maybe we can let some other people talk about it too. Back to the question about examples of the best ways to create business value, cost savings, risk reduction, even PR and marketing benefits. Let's start the conversation. I'm just going to throw it open. Answer the question or ask another question.
anybody participated in or paid any attention to the last election, I think one thing we came out of it very concretely was that people want more jobs in this country. We need more jobs. Shouldn't that be a topic of what we're talking about in the environmental aspect of it? If we're talking about creating a new product, take it down the line, that product should be created here in this country. It should set up jobs. Sean talked about setting up jobs within the industry, and that happens as well too. But I think taking a step further would be really valuable to promote the whole idea of conservation and economy. If we could argue that down the chain, if we do this, it will establish jobs. And then going back to my earlier question of this morning, we have to recognize the value of the government in all of that, either in providing legislation that does it or in supporting the idea of creating factories or establishments within this country that would create jobs to support the environment.
And there's, from the green economy, I think about maybe it's a quality economy, I start to think. I try not to take the colors out of the equation. But when you start to think about some of the models and frameworks that come out of sustainable thinking, think about distributed energy, make energy close to the point of use. Local manufacturing, with what we know now, how do we manufacture close to the point of use where you can create the manufacturing jobs, and just to start to think differently around it. And then people often, come to me, especially when you give talks, and they ask about the jobs and they ask about green, and you get into that argument, and you can think about where we're poised for a new industrial revolution with what we're learning and what we're knowing. And sure, we were talking about this last night at dinner, there were a lot of typewriter repair people who got put out of work when the computer was introduced. You think about how that has just infused our economy between software and hardware, just in the whole IT world as we think about it. The same thing in Detroit, they were named after the carriage manufacturers. They were probably mad when they motorized those things and the horse people got upset, and we have those in major disruptive transformations, and we are poised at this amazing place right now where I hope in my optimistic space there are going to be more jobs as companies like you create these strategies. I'm super optimistic that this is a way to create really great jobs.
Well, Elizabeth, we were talking at lunch a little bit. There's been so much focus on kind of the LCA work that this whole, that really doesn't take into account, local economy, rural vibrancy. So there are a lot of other values that perhaps being more efficient has a lower carbon footprint, but you're going to be exporting jobs someplace else. And you just need to understand what those values are as you're developing these ideas.
Other questions? Maybe up to Mark.
Beth, actually, you were mentioning at the end of the last discussion that a lot of people were very interested in the consumer and the end consumer voice. And I know that you mentioned, Sean, certainly, that you do a lot to pay attention to what your consumers or what your customers want. I'm curious, what if your customer doesn't quite know what he or she wants? Can you help him or her along in that thinking? And how does that work? Not just you, but anyone. I'm curious. Because a lot of times I hear big companies that I've talked to say, well, we don't really influence what the customer wants. And I say, why do you spend hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising? It's just to get the word out about how wonderful you are. No, probably you do influence a little bit, is my own bias. Can you comment?
Well, I think that's why there's a lot of the term customer insight comes about. I mean, every CPG company has to know who their market is and what kind of product they're going to sell, and if it's going to sell. And it goes back to knowing your customer. There's the customers, again, their habits change. You have to understand the customer's habits and how it affects your business. And you have to be in front of that. And that's where innovation happens. So and again, it's probably a lot smarter people than I am that have to understand, they have to calculate all those Nielsen ratings and everything they do on product development. But it goes down to staying in front of your consumer without having to go and ask them. You need to be thinking about it before they ask on their traditional behavior and where they're shifting. Just like you mentioned, shifts in industrial, from carriage to typewriters to computers, from the cars and the gas-powered engine. Those are big defining moments where the customer, they didn't know if the customer really wanted this. They just said, look, this is new technology. We just invented it. It's cool. So we're going to go ahead and roll it out there. And it took off. And a lot of everything we do and every new product we roll out or service, there is a gamble. So, but it is, again, bottom line, it's just staying in front of your consumer. So, I don't know if I answered your question, but go ahead.
I don't know that I've got I certainly don't have a marketing background, and kind of feel like Sean, we have a lot of people that are crunching those numbers on insights, and at some point you've got to make a gamble, because I don't think that, for example, the Pet Rock, if you guys remember the Pet Rock, I'm sure nobody did a consumer study to say somebody go buy a Pet Rock. Somebody just decided to try it and did it and made a lot of money. So there's somewhere in between those two, there's the right balance, but that.
Don't forget silly bands.
Yeah.
Definition of sustainable, the Pet Rock. Yeah.
Well,
That's
yeah.
it.
And silly, 40 years from now, they're going to remember silly bands. Yeah. I think that's a great point. But when is it going to be cool? How do you, customer insights is trying to define cool. And, the holy grail is, what's going to be cool next Christmas? And defining what is cool and who makes things cool in our culture. And then how do we make sustainability cool? Somebody held up their iPhone, so it's cool. Who knew that we needed to have a computer next to our phone? If you think back, 20 years ago, you had phones and computers were the size of this room, or maybe it was 25 years ago. Phones were rotary. Whoever thought we'd have them all, attached to our ear? So what's going to be cool in 3 years, and how can we not? Now, how do we make it cool? We were talking, I think, earlier about the SunChip bag, and someone we work with who was formerly in the advertising field, he said, there was a missed moment. Why couldn't that really noisy bag be cool? And you were cool to be eating out of this compostable bag. And everybody be racing to have the noisier, and maybe like lunchtime in cafeterias for kids would be really outrageous. Everybody went noisier and noisier from a decibel level. But why couldn't we make noisy cool? Compostable meant noisy meant really cool. So where are these moments to define the next cool in our space? And who defines that? When does Madison Avenue come in this conversation too?
Yeah, I have a question to tie it back to the opening comments on quality and sustainability, the two together. I have a belief that sustainability is the new quality. The way quality was introduced as a mindset back in the '80s and kind of permeated the businesses and consumer thought. But here's the paradox or the conundrum, if you will. I know what a quality product is when I see it. It's when I buy it, it does what it's supposed to do, and I don't have to return it. It doesn't break down. But how do you know you have a sustainable product? How do you know that you bought something and it's sustainable? And so, at some point in the last 25 years, we went past that tipping point where quality is just part of what we do as businesses and as companies. What is it going to take to get to that tipping point for sustainability, and how will we know that we have a sustainability ingrained in our process?
There's an article, and in fact, I've talked and I've sent this around to several people at Walmart. Rand Waddups, when he was in the sustainability group, we talked about this a lot. In 1987, there was this pivotal article called The 8 Dimensions of Quality, and you can download it off of HBR. David Gavin is the author. He talked about 8 dimensions of quality. This was, remember the 80s? Like Dr. Duran and Deming, and they were giving all these big, very expensive quality sessions and the business case for quality and engaging your customer around quality. Does this sound familiar? That was the mid to late 80s, especially if you're in Detroit. Well, the 8 dimensions are performance of features, the features themselves, intermittent windshield wipers, this is an example. Does it have the features I want? Reliability, conformance to specification, durability, serviceability, aesthetics, and then finally, to your point, is perceived quality. I was actually going to talk about this, that's why it's here. Is perceived quality. I just know it when I see it. And I would say there's 2 hypotheses. Is one, that sustainability is the 9th dimension, because if a product is unsustainable, can it be a quality product? If it has risk, think what unsustainable means. It is risk, that it uses too much resource. Just list all the things that we have. So can that really be a quality product and have these unsustainable attributes? Or, to your point, maybe it's just another form of quality and it just falls along these 8 dimensions to have that. Because you're still going to have some conformance to specification, but you're also going to have the perceived aspect of it. I just know it's more sustainable than this at the customer. So I don't have the answer. I think there's 2 hypotheses, and maybe we're both right. I don't know.
We hope the Sustainable Consortium and the Product Index will help indicate to consumers what a sustainable product would look like. End goal. Since we're on campus, I thought we'd give us that plug. John Johnson's in here. So.
And I agree, it's just another dimension of quality. If you try to separate it out, I don't see that ever surviving long-term, but if you make it a dimension of quality, then I think you can continue to evolve people's expectations.
Just a couple of remarks. I don't think we can talk about sustainable and not sustainable because it's always more sustainable. And yes, quality is a part of that, but that's just the beginning. So I think if you think as sustainability, that has to be transported to the consumer. That has to be applied at the consumer good. So that consumer good has to become or be pitched to the end consumer as more sustainable. That involves a place to start that everybody has to, let's say, pass before you even start improving, and that'll be minimum requirements. And then you have to show progress over time. And those standards are there that actually spell this out. And then what you can do is bring in a third-party certification company that will actually show that the progress is genuine and it has been made and it has been accomplished. And lastly, actually, you need to pitch it somehow to the consumer. From the experience the global experience that we have, even in Europe, consumers are not going to buy sustainable products or more sustainable products because they don't know what it is. And we're not going to train everybody to understand what sustainability is. So what we're going to have to do is go to the heart of the consumer of what matters today. And if you look at sustainability as environmental impact, creating jobs, not using child labor, affordability, and all that stuff, we got to come down to either a message that encompasses all that, or call it better for you product, or better for your kids product, or better for the next generation product. And that's how you market it to the consumer. Just something that we've been thinking about for a couple of years.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Any responses to that or any other questions that people have? We have time for one more question before we transition, or feedback or a comment or observation. Anything else, especially if there's somebody who hasn't posed a question or made a comment previously? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth and Catherine, Chip, Sean. Really, really great to have your perspective.